Welcome back to another edition of Byline with Ben Dennis. Exciting conversation today. How much control do you really have on your social media feed of what you see? Is your phone really listening to you? How AI is going to change our lives tomorrow, a year from now, and if we can actually reset our own feeds to find what we want, or maybe even get a healthier diet of news, of content. With all these questions, I take them to somebody with a breadth of knowledge in this arena. Katie Harbeth, she is the CEO of Anchor Change. Anchor Change helps consult with companies on strategizing, AI governance, campaign strategy, ethics surrounding all of that, as well as crisis management. But here's the kicker. Katie used to work for Facebook. She would help coach politicians to use social media platforms in order to reach voters, to reach constituents, maybe certainly advance a particular narrative, and help engage back at home. She also went on to help in this similar arena on a global scale. She has a particular knowledge of how governments have potential control over what you see, what the federal government might not be doing right now that your local state leaders are in order to regulate AI platforms. With that, it's a timely conversation. She has immense insight into how AI is shaping the content we see online. After certainly we've seen how social media companies have done the same over the past 15, 20 years. Let's get right into my conversation with Katie. Let's do it. And joining me now on Byline is Katie Harbeth. She's the CEO of Anchor Change, a tech consulting firm helping companies strategize AI governance, election integrity, and also crisis management. I pulled it straight from the bio of her website. Katie spent some considerable amount of time in politics as well as at Facebook for several years. Katie, did I describe Anchor Change accurately? And if you can, just really tell us what Anchor Change is all about.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And it's been interesting. Anchor Change has really evolved over the last 5 years since I left Facebook because the world has evolved, right? When I originally left, I was really helping companies think about their election policies, politics, trust and safety, content moderation. I'm still doing a lot of that, working with think tanks like the Bipartisan Policy Center and Aspen Institute here in DC. But now it is really focused on that intersection of AI, politics, platform governance, helping a lot of these, not just the platforms now think about how these issues manifest in an AI era, but also helping public affairs firms and those same think tanks and nonprofits how to even just use AI. Like, what is a good prompt? How do you think about agents? All of those types of things. So it's really fun and exciting. A little terrifying at the same time, too, that I really don't know, what my work's going to continue to look like over the next couple of months because the technology keeps changing, but that's what keeps it exciting.
All asking similar questions. I get it. And it may be terrifying, but we're all adjusting to it, if you will, and it's moving at a rapid pace. So the real purpose I wanted to get to here is I have so many conversations with my colleagues in the news world. This is just one example of our stories will be put out, and they're not necessarily, at least initially, crafty social media type, pieces or posts that are news driven. They're not something that gets people hot and heated. It's not necessarily always exciting or controversial, and therefore they never get to people's feeds in some cases. I posted a TikTok the other day, and this is showing that I'm growing my own strategy, had 0 views, none whatsoever. So I wanted to really dive into what we don't know that's happening behind the scenes when we open social media, how the algorithms are crafting the content that we get, and maybe even some consumer-friendly advice of how we proceed to maybe tailor what we actually want, but making sure we don't fall into the misinformation space. So the first thing I want to ask is, when we open our social media apps, what determines what I see first, if you have a couple examples?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and there's a lot of different factors that go into it. It's really individualized by each person. And I think it's really important for people to know that they have agency over what their algorithms look like, but they need to be intentional about that and understand that. Because when you open up, whether it's your Instagram, your TikTok, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, name the social media site that has a newsfeed in it. There's usually more content than you could ever see possible, which is why they need to have an algorithm to try to show you the things that you're most likely they think want to see. And they usually determine that by a couple of things. It's the things you click on, it's the things you comment on, it's the things you stop on the scroll and watch the video or not. And then it usually tries to show you similar types of content and a lot of that's what's called unconnected content. So it may not just be from people you follow, but they're like, "Oh, so I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I like the Packers." So if they're like, she watched this Packers piece of content, she might like this influencer that's talking about the Packers. So we might show her that content.
We
And
have this For You page on X, for example.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes people be like, I just want to see the people I follow. So some of the apps do offer you that option too. And a lot of times people are also like, why can't I just get a chronological feed? Why can't I just get the chronological feed of everything I can see? The challenge there is if many of these platforms were to do that, is it actually opens it up for scammers and fraudsters and people that it would benefit people that just post constantly. And so it actually isn't as good of a user experience if you're doing something chronologically. So that's what the platforms are all trying to weigh. Plus, then there's an advertising algorithm too that's separate of like, what are the ads that you're most likely to click on or not? And so this is where we get into that conversation about design, right? And engagement, because people might say, they're like intellectually, they're like, I really want more news content, or I want content from across the political spectrum, or whatever it might be. But if that's not what your behavior does, the platform's operating off your behavior, not your intention. And so that's why I say people, if you don't like what's in your feed, some apps like TikTok actually allow you to clear out your algorithm and start all over again to do that. And so I oftentimes recommend people, I try to do this every 6 months or so, of when I go and open up any of these apps, really be intentional of like, is this the type of content I want in my feed? And if not, actively go and search for the type of content I do want to have to try to retrain the algorithm.
How quickly does the system pick you up and start to really zone in on what you're interested in? Is it a couple of hours? Is it days? Or
No, it's like seconds. It's the first content that so you sign up, you've got a new account. It's going to show you pieces of content that tend to be already very popular with folks. But sometimes too, when you sign up, it'll ask you like, what topics are you interested in?
Right.
And in fact, on Instagram, you can actually go and see what topics it thinks you're interested in. And then you can try to go and curate that if you want. But it starts from the first thing you scroll past.
We talk a lot about cookies. We have these pop-ups that appear when you go on a website. If you open an app, does it want to track your location? Does it want to track your what's the word I'm looking for? User experience on other apps as well. So I wanted to ask, you had brought up advertising. Are our phones really listening to us and then shooting advertisements toward us based on what we talked about 10 seconds ago?
They at least to my knowledge, they are not. And this has been something that's sort of been debunked across the internet. So I will just say, to my knowledge, I do not believe that they are. But what ends up happening is if you have a friend that was, let's say, searching for a particular pair of shoes, and then you two are having a conversation, it may know, Facebook or whatever might know that you two are friends on that platform. And they're like, oh, if your friend likes this, you might like this too. So oftentimes it's coincidence. It's using other signals that are giving it those signals versus straight up listening to you, at least to my knowledge, around that. Like, it's something that I think people have to be aware of, because it's a lot more devices than just our phones now that can be listening, right? If you have Amazon Alexa or Google Home, or there's so many more things now that might be listening to you that people have to be careful about, because there's really interesting privacy and trust and safety trade-offs that go with giving people ease and convenience of using voice activated platforms. And do you need to have a wake up word or not? Or what are they listening to? And so that's been some interesting conversations I've been having with some of my clients, and also thinking about what you do in households where there's children that might be trying to use those voice activated types of devices versus an adult, for instance.
A lot of privacy concerns. Let me ask, is the algorithm reacting to me, or is it trying to steer me?
It's a little bit of both, I think. And it is a really interesting, again, kind of trust and safety type question that these platforms will have from a politics perspective, for instance, because that's where I had most of my experience at Facebook. Sometimes people would be like, why can't we just show people across the political spectrum, right? Don't just show them, even if they might be only interested in content of a particular persuasion, right or left or whatever it might be. If we want people to be more well-rounded, maybe we should be inserting content from the other side into their newsfeed, but that's not necessarily what people want. And then it's a bad user experience, and then they might leave the platform on that. Who are we to, I'm going to use we here as the platform, who are the platforms to decide which political content is worthwhile going into your feed or not? Like, who are we to be paternalistic about making those types of decisions? And so that's where it gets tricky in terms of where do you want to be reacting to what you as the user is engaging with and wanting in your feed versus what do we as a society think that people should be getting to have a well-rounded news diet.
Do you think social media platforms are no longer the town square and they are de facto publishers because they are determining what is in front of you?
So I will admit I was somebody way back in the day that talked about social media being the town square, but it really never was, right? It was more like the mall where you have private businesses around there that can make their own decisions, right? Versus a town square that is considered more of a public, a public good, has very much more strict First Amendment rules and of what people can or cannot do and all of that. And so I think that was a mistake that we made in the early days of even calling social media a town square. And I forgot your second part of the question. If you could repeat it, please.
There's some legal debate about
Publishers.
Yes, about being a publisher because these platforms have their own algorithms and they're determining what you see. It's not just who you subscribe to, right?
So this is something that I do think we need to have a lot more conversation on because they are not a publisher in the sense that we think about. I have a journalism background. I went to school for journalism, and I remember working at the student newspaper, and we would have to decide the stories that would appear on the front page, right, or that you would publish. Now, what a social media platform is doing is it's similar, but not exactly the same. And so I don't think it's fair to use the same definition, but people do need to understand that the platforms are making decisions. For instance, if they have a new product, like a video product, they might be being like, I'm going to show people more video because I want more people using that product. I want creators creating video because that's what we see. And so all of a sudden you might start seeing, like on Facebook or Instagram, more reels in your feed than before. But it's also reacting to you. And so it's that mixture of providing it's almost like a customized front page, right, to every single individual. And that's based upon your preferences. And that's where the difference is from a traditional publisher. And so I do think that we need to talk more about what are those levers that these platforms do have. And people need to be aware of those when they are logging on and understanding what content is being shown to them.
What are these platforms trying to maximize on? They're obviously businesses, so they want to bring you back for more. They're not going to shoot you things you're not interested in. Is it just clicks and eyeballs?
I mean, they are businesses. They're trying to make money, and most of them, talking about it from a social media platform standpoint, right now, most of them are making money off of advertising. And so then there's a combination of they need people on the platform. To get people on the platform, you need content on that platform that they want to see. Most people are lurkers. They're not creating content. And so that's where you see the competition for influencers, celebrities, other people to be creating content. So, that's where you try to see like Facebook trying to monetize and trying to entice influencers to post exclusively on a Facebook or Instagram versus a TikTok, because they're hoping that will make people want to open up that app in which to do that. And then when you do that, the advertisers want to be there, and the advertisers want to be there because they have good targeting and all of those types of things. So this is that balance between, yes, they want to make money, but they need to have users on the platform in order to do that. And so if you're doing things that drives users away, then that's not good from an advertising perspective too. And so I think number one is always business, that I think we should just be honest about that on there. But then it's really been an interesting evolution over the years of different platforms being like, wanting to be a part of the conversation, the cultural relevance, things of that nature. And so trying to find that balance too of like what type of content they're trying to encourage on the platform.
Well, why do you think emotional and extreme content rises? Is it deliberate? Are these platforms deliberately putting that out there, even if it's false information?
Well, that we can get into a whole conversation about how hard it is to determine what's true and false and
Mhm.
and fact checking and all of that. But I think like this goes back to even before the social media days, right? Like in my old journalism school things, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Like this is even traditional media is looking at what are the things that people are going to pick up the paper to read, that it became what are they going to click on in
Shock
order
value
to
there.
shock value. And so
Yeah.
that's existed. And that goes back to, again, of us as humans really thinking intentionally, what are we engaging with? What signals are we giving the platforms, the media of what it is that they want to cover? Because they're just trying to react to that too. And so all I'm trying to say is that I think, again, it goes back to that intentionality and that the algorithms and what we're being shown is not just happening to us. We also need to take some agency in helping to shape that as well.
How do you think content ultimately shapes what people believe over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does even whatever's online, what your neighbors say, right? Like, I think we are all constantly, and frankly, these days, a lot more inputs into what is helping us decide everything from who we're going to vote for to what brand of laundry detergent we're going to buy that day. And we're seeing that shift from, and it's gone through cycles. I think if you look over the history, there's a great book I love called The Fourth Turning is Here by Neil Howe that talks about sort of these cyclical historical natures in American history. And so sometimes it's institutions, right? So sometimes back in the, many, many decades ago, it was three news broadcasts. You had the news anchors. Those were folks that were usually really influencing what people saw and believed. You would have, celebrities or other influencers who are, doing a commercial for a particular brand of something. Now it's both influencers and individuals. People I think have so much input and aren't sure who to trust. They're like, I'm going to trust my neighbor next door. I'm going to trust my friends and people that I've built up I'm going to use the word relationship here,
Mhm.
but with online, because it seems like people are like, okay, I trust you. I trust you, Ben, as an individual versus maybe the institution that you are working for, because I can better relate. I know who you are as a person because I've followed your content. I've seen what you've posted over time. You've built up trust with me that you saying it is going to make me believe it a lot more than that person I don't know.
Do you think that that is a detriment in a democratic society where people just naturally are siding with or looking for content creators that already affirm their own beliefs versus challenge them?
Well, I think so. This is an interesting thing I learned at Facebook when we were trying to think through, again, what we were talking about earlier about what types of content should platforms be inserting into people's feeds, right? Versus just reacting to what type of content they want. And there was an interesting study that showed that if people are constantly challenged about their beliefs, it puts you into a fight or flight mode and you tend to get more entrenched in what you believe. And so this is why you oftentimes see people going into their own tribes because it's from an emotionally safety area. They're like, okay, I'm not going to constantly have to like defend myself, which really puts people in a tough spot of really not really wanting to listen to it. And so it goes back to that sort of having that balance of when do you engage with people? How do you give people the tools to understand and think through what differing, not just beliefs, but like what's happening in the world, et cetera. And we've done a very poor job of that as more and more people are just overloaded with information and then they tend to shut down rather than actually engage. And so I think that this is a balance that all of us are trying to figure out of how do we just go about our daily lives, but also make sure that, we are getting the accurate information that's out there.
Do you think social media platforms, has there been any evidence that they are purposefully trying to put or pigeonhole people in their own political boxes, if you will? And, therefore it's driving more clicks for people coming back.
I can only speak to like what my experience was at Facebook. And I have to say I've not seen it at other platforms either. I've not seen it publicly. There's obviously a lot of speculation by people, but the reality is, and what I experienced the 10 years I was at Facebook, the scale of content that we are dealing with and like the scale of the number of users, we just simply cannot do what you were just saying, right? We are going to purposely, Ben, I think we want to just show you Republican content. And Megan, we're going to just show you left leaning content, right? Like we can't go to that granular of a level. of trying to do that. Now, where this does come in, and it goes back to that earlier question we were doing, how much do the platforms, should they only react to what you're engaging with, which would probably tend to be or individuals are engaging with, which might be one particular political party, versus where should the platform, and is it their job to be being like, oh, if you're getting a lot of Republican content, we're going to start putting some Rachel Maddow in your feed because we think you should be getting a more diverse political diet. Do we really want the platforms making that decision around what it is that we are pushing into people's feeds? Like, I think defining what you would push in there and whether or not we want them to do that, I think a lot of people would be like, no, I don't want the platforms making that call for me. I want to be able to make that call myself. And so then that brings in more of a digital literacy question, right? Like, of how do we help people understand sort of what rabbit holes they might be going into online and offline, and how do you be smarter about what you're engaging with in an online environment?
Might as well just label tech companies the fifth estate at this point. The legacy media,
Yeah.
the fourth estate, tech companies, the fifth estate. I haven't heard anybody make that case, so I'm going to make it here right now. What's one impact on everyday life that people are underestimating right now, the way that content is driven toward them?
I mean, I think that one thing people might be underestimating is just how much regular things in your daily life offline can also impact what you're seeing online. So you go to the grocery store and you use a loyalty card to get 15% off that shredded cheese in the aisle. And the magazines you subscribe to, the car you have, all of that consumer data for many, 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 many years is something that brands and tech companies and everybody can buy in order to better understand what to serve to you from a marketing standpoint. And so it's not just what you're engaging with online and across a bunch of different websites, like you're talking about with the cookies. It's also what you're doing in that offline life too. And so I think a lot of people, it's a lot of work, and I don't want to say that it's easy, but just understanding that and thinking through, is this data I want to be out there? This is the type of stuff that people might be using in terms of trying to persuade me. And just being conscious of it in and of itself, I think is really smart. And then knowing that you have a lot of control of being able to go in and turn some of these things off or not, or have your data being sold, but know that that comes with a trade-off of convenience and being shown things that are more applicable to you. And so that's one of the challenges I sometimes see people do, where they're like, I don't want anyone having any of my data. They turn it all off, and then they're like, well, now my experience isn't as good.
Right. How are companies using AI now to reshape algorithms?
Yeah, well, I think it's in a couple of different ways that this is a really interesting conversation right now because I'm going to start, if I can, I'm going to start with the AI platforms, because now in the age of AI, we have to be thinking about a couple of additional questions when it comes to content. So if you're on a ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, right? First comes the prompt. So what are you prompting? And does the AI company even want you to be able to do that prompt? So there's some things like how to make a bomb that they're going to be like, no, you can't do. But there might be other things of help me to create, here's my email list and the data I have of people. Please create an individual ad for each one of these people or an individualized email to each of them. That gets a little trickier because on one hand, we want to make sure that marketers we're getting you something that you're interested in. But on the other hand, there's less transparency in that. And when they might be saying, especially from a political campaign, are they telling you one thing and your neighbor a different thing? Like, how do we know what they're saying out there? So then you have the prompt and what's allowed. You have the response. How does the AI company respond to that? Do they allow you to create that AI image of Donald Trump as Jesus? Right? Do they allow you to create those types of those? And then you have the distribution mechanism. So that's where the social media platforms come in again. And it's both, are they allowing the AI content to be distributed? Does it need to be labeled or not? And we should talk about labels and the challenges around
I
labels.
question this all the time, especially Congress's role here. And
Yeah,
we can get into
exactly.
that.
And then you also have, when you're seeing your content in the feed, you're starting to see AI being used to summarize what's in your feed, summarize what's in the comments
Your text
section.
messages.
Text message. Yeah, exactly. And so all of this is now starting to get summarized Also, this is all giving all these companies a lot more data to train these AI algorithms. And now what Meta's talking about is from an advertising perspective, is that you can go in, if you're a small business owner, rather than having to be like create all the creative, figure out who to target, you can just do a prompt and be like, I'm a coffee shop in Charleston, South Carolina. Here's my logo. I want to sell coffee. Target people, like go forth and prosper. And the AI will create the creative. It'll figure out who to target. It'll do all of that. You just give it the budget and it'll go and create all of that. And so on one hand, that's going to be a really great opportunity for people that don't have the funds and stuff to build out those ads. But on the flip side, that's giving a lot of power to Meta to be making those decisions about what that advertising looks like and what is being served to people. And I think a lot of questions around transparency around that and how those decisions are getting made are going to be something that we're going to continue to talk about as well.
A lot of scrutiny if Congress should have had a bigger oversight role in social media companies back in the early 2000s. Do you think we're past the point of no return with these AI companies?
I don't think we're ever past the point of no return. I don't think we're going to see anything on the federal level for at least until there's a new presidential administration. I just think the next 3 years are going to be constant campaigning and infighting and all of that. But we are seeing a lot in the states, right? So we're seeing a lot of, even just from last year to this year, the number of state bills around AI have doubled. And so on one hand, that is good. And it's a way to sort of even just, have a marketplace of ideas in terms of what type of regulation we want for these AI companies. But on the flip side, it's actually entrenching the bigger companies because they have the funds and the means in which to comply with all these different state laws, let alone the ones in different countries like Europe, Australia, UK, et cetera. And it makes it a lot harder for smaller companies and smaller startups to comply and to compete with those big folks because they don't necessarily have the funds in which to do it. I was doing a talk to the National Venture Capitalists Association in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. And this was one of the big things they were all talking about is they're like, we can't both try to grow our platform and be able to comply with 25 different state laws right now. And so we either have to decide to not be in that state, or we have to figure out what it is that we're going to do, or we may have to shut down because we don't have the funds in which to comply.
Why don't you think Congress has the appetite right now to add some oversight here?
Because the devil's in the details. I think that, everyone, they said this about social media too. There's a lot of Congress agrees and bipartisan is something should be dev, but the devil is in the question of how to do that. What does that look like? How do you do that in a way that doesn't run afoul of First Amendment rights or not? Also, the technology is changing so quickly. So this is one of the gap between what is happening in Silicon Valley when I go to San Francisco and I go and talk to my friends that are at these AI companies. They're talking about agents. They're talking about world models. They're talking about quantum. They're talking about robotics. They are so far ahead. Whereas here in DC, I'm still this is an LLM. This is what a good prompt is. This is what AI is. They're just not moving fast enough to even get their heads wrapped around of where the puck is going on a lot of all of this. And so one of the things you're starting to hear a lot more too is maybe it's not that we need new laws. Maybe it's how do we use the existing laws on the books to try to provide some guardrails around all of this and be more creative about it.
Give me an example. Let's talk about this labeling. AI generated videos, images, they pop up on your social media. You don't know if it's real or not. You see a chicken, boxing Mike Tyson and it looks real. Is there any laws on the books that could possibly compel companies to say, or at least social media platforms to pick up on something that is AI generated and let the user know that this is not real?
Yeah. So you're seeing that particularly around political ads. Nothing at the federal level, but at the state level, there's a lot of states that require if they use AI to say that it's AI generated. What's interesting is Texas does not have that, and you're seeing a lot more AI generated ads in the Texas Senate race because of it. But the challenge with labels, though, and we found this out after 2016 when we started trying to label fact checking like true or false, or even here's how you vote, or during COVID, trying to send people to CDC and accurate information. Is one, if we labeled everything that everyone wanted to label, your mobile feed, your news feed would just be labels. So there's one question of what do you label and what do you not label? The second thing, which is a lot harder, is people start to get label fatigue, meaning they don't even pay attention to it. They don't realize it's there. They don't look for it. They're just trying to click through to the content. And so this is one of my frustrations with policymakers who think the answer is just label it, just tell people it's AI generated. Well, then the question is also too, what is what do you mean by AI generated? There's a difference between generating a fake, like you said, the chicken fighting Mike Tyson. But what if it's I want a particular background shot of a barn at sunset in a soybean field? Is that okay? Do we need to tell people that? Maybe. What if AI was used to generate the script, but it's all humans that are actually doing it? Should that be labeled AI? So one of the challenges, one of the things I wish we were having more of the conversation on at the Federal Election Commission level or even at the state level is we got to get a lot more granular when we're talking about what it is that people should label and what they're seeing in order to actually give people the right context of how AI was used and what it is that they're seeing and what the intent of the person was that created that content.
Give me a couple examples of how you would like to see that applied.
Say that again.
Give me an example or two of how you think that would be applied in an appropriate way. You talk about political advertising, certainly. Anything else?
Well, I mean, what's interesting right now is sort of similar to when Photoshop was first introduced, right? Like we don't necessarily, most photos these days that you see in the newspaper, online, whatever it is that a traditional media outlet would do was probably edited with Photoshop, but we don't see necessarily a label that says this photo was edited by Photoshop. We might see a photo illustration credit or something like that if they were putting a composite together. And so I do think there's a role for labels. I just think we need to be a lot more clear and continue to do user research and stuff on the best way in which to show those labels. But I would also like to see companies, and I do this personally on my Substack, I would like to see a lot more transparency disclosures around here's how we as a brand, here's how we as a news outlet, here's how we, whatever you are using AI. So that people can at least understand, okay, this is what their thought process was in doing it. And then you as the reader or viewer or whatever consumer of that content can then decide if you want to engage with it or not. And you at least understand the nuance and the approach that they're trying to take with it. And I have found that it has built up more trust with my readers, with me being super transparent with them about what I'm doing versus them being like, hey, this seems AI generated. Is it AI generated? Like, how did she use it, et cetera? Because that causes distrust in them when the person's not being forthright about the tools that they're using.
I've used this in my own personal world. I was reporting in Richmond for a couple of years prior to reporting in DC, and I had an exclusive scoop here and there, but I would tell people how I got there. The process of asking question A, going to person A, asking question B with a follow-up thereafter, and people appreciate that. And to your point, it helps with the trust factor.
Yeah, and I think that political campaigns don't shy away from it. Like I would prefer that people lean into it and let's have that ethical conversation. I find that the rooms that I go in when I'm like, here's how I'm struggling about where I use AI or not, where my own ethical guardrails are or not, and how those evolve. And you can feel the room exhale and they're like, oh, thank God we can have this conversation. And then you start to have people sharing, here's how I've used it. Here's where I've drawn the line. Here's where I'm okay with it or not. And then it helps people think through it on their own, and they don't feel as scared because right now people I feel are a little bit frozen where they're both being told if they don't use AI, they're going to lose their job, but also if they use it, they're cheating. And that's not a great spot to have people in.
Let me go back into your own experience in Facebook. As this was scaling, when did you realize that this was bigger than just a tech product, that this was also contributing to society, contributing to political conversation, et cetera?
I mean, I have to say it was probably, for me, it kind of goes back even to '08 Obama, the '08 campaign. And then you really had the Arab Spring that happened in that 2010, 2011 timeframe that I think was really the first time when people are like, oh, wow, like this is got a really big societal impact. And I would say even a few years after that was the very, we all had kind of rose-colored glasses on at that period of time because it was sort of like the internet could be the great democratizer, right? It was a very positive, and we didn't do enough of thinking about the downsides that come with that. And as you get bigger, how bad actors are going to be trying to manipulate that, whether they're fraudsters, the next version of the Nigerian prince trying to get money out of you, or it's an authoritarian government trying to suppress speech or or Russian influence or things of that nature. And so we've really been spending the last 10 years catching up to that. And now I think I have a book coming out in the fall that looks at this sort of 25-year time period from 2000 to the tech CEOs at the inauguration in 25. And it's my story kind of going through all of that. And it's really interesting. I think some of the things we did not pay attention to in the early days, social media, are ones I think we should be paying attention to now in the AI era. And I think there's a lot of things that we can learn as we're trying to navigate this new technology that's changing every single day.
No, you don't want to give all the answers because you have a book coming out later this fall. But if you could give me one example of some missteps that you think could apply with these AI companies.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I think one thing is thinking about product decisions that are being made now that like many years down the line could be a problem. And to give you an example in the past, then I'll give you an example today. The Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened in March of 2018 with Facebook around, what data was being used for people to help try to persuade them of different, political, both Brexit in the UK and Trump here in the States, was actually born out of a decision made 8 years earlier in 2010 by Facebook when they created something called Open Graph, which if you all remember playing Farmville and you would like log in with Facebook and then you could find your friends playing Farmville, it was the same sort of technology. Obama used it in 2012 with targeted sharing. And when they launched Open Graph, they didn't think about the fact that, if we allow researchers to pull down this information of people's likes and shares, how do we make sure that they're not using it in a nefarious way? Because once it comes down off our platform, how do we track that, et cetera? They didn't think through that. And I think one of the things now with AI, I'll use an example like, yes, there's a lot of really great opportunities around healthcare and helping you to make better decisions about your health. But if you're uploading that to ChatGPT right now, or you're uploading that to Claude, we don't know how that information can be used down the line in a way that we may not want it to. And those companies may not necessarily be thinking about that because they're just trying to stay competitive and continue to compete with, Claude or ChatGPT or Llama or Grok or whatever it might be. And so those are questions that I know a lot of people are asking, but it also, government pressure, et cetera, on these platforms to be thinking about some of those things and helping consumers think through what is it that you're putting into these platforms and how might it be used in the future.
The early warning signs you saw at Facebook when you were there, did it feel fixable at the time?
Gosh, it was all what I call impossible trade-offs. This was one of the things that it's been so interesting to learn because everybody had a different viewpoint about what should be done. And so it was really challenging. It's not like we could go out and do some polling, talk to some experts, and everyone's like, yes, this is the direction you should go, right? And so it was really about trying to figure out what you were trading off and what might happen and what might be best both for the users, for society, et cetera. And the problem is that we've learned a lot so much in these last, 10, 15 years. Back in the day when we were first doing that, there really wasn't a playbook. We didn't know how this stuff was going to unfold. And so you're trying to make decision with the information you had at the time. And this is why I say there's a lot that we can learn as we're going into this AI era from the social media one, because I think that if people look at that sort of history, we can be like, okay, what even though it doesn't look exactly the same now, what do we wish we had thought through then? And how can we use that knowledge now as we're trying to build these AI models?
What do you think was underestimated about the impact that those shortfalls had at the time?
The impact of what we didn't do at Facebook, around.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big one is just I think this trust deficit that we as a society have, not just in institutions, but businesses, but leaders, stuff like that. I think the trust in the social media platforms and tech itself was really damaged by us not being fast enough in terms of thinking about how do we find these influence operations? Why don't we provide more transparency around political ads? All that kind of stuff. In hindsight, I really wish we would have built out in 2010, 2012, and not wait until after the 2016 election for that to happen.
I want to use the remaining time that we have here wisely. So I want to ask some timely questions. Who actually has the power over what people see online today? Is it the companies? Is it governments in some cases, as you had mentioned in authoritarian examples, or is it the algorithms themselves?
It's all of the above plus each one of us as the user, because it's a combination of all of that depending upon where you are. There are some countries that have passed laws that will tell these platforms content that can stay up or needs to be taken down. And in some cases, like I know in Singapore, if the government asks that, I think Facebook will at least do this, I think others too, they will say this content was removed at the request of the Singaporean government, for
Hmm.
instance, and stuff like that. So it really is all of the above. And that's why it's important for people to understand this isn't all just happening to you. You do have agency in terms of the platforms you choose to go on, what news you choose to consume, and what you're engaging with. And so it's just important to, again, understand that so that you know what you're getting and why.
Do you worry, though, about governments using these tools to influence people?
I mean, that was my job. That was the dream back in the early days. Like when I was doing campaigns in, the early 2000s, the dream was having the president of the United States on these platforms talking directly to the voters. We thought that that was a good thing. And I still think there are a lot of positive elements that have come from people being able to interact directly with their elected officials. The question comes to how do you help to provide more context beyond that so that people have that ability in which to, have a government. Because remember, too, it's not just government officials like the president or your member of Congress. It's your local city council. It's your school board that's telling you about what's happening at your child's school that day. It's helping you to understand who you need to talk to about that pothole out there in the street, or when your snow plows are going to come through when it snows and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of government services that I think have been really improved by the fact that you have not just social media, but online opportunities in general. And so I think that what we need to continue to think about is, again, how do we help people get the context that they need to understand that, hey, what you're hearing from an elected official, a candidate, et cetera, is one perspective. It's not necessarily the full story.
There's a widespread criticism. I'm sure you've had conversations about this too, about the nationalization of
Yeah.
politics and any type of issue. Why should some small town mayor in Nebraska need to publicize his opinion on what's happening in the Middle East? It's that he has no power over that
Yeah.
right now. He probably would rather, he has more a stake in the game by fixing the potholes in the roads. It's not his opinion of foreign policy. Do you think the tech companies had something to do with the nationalization of politics right now, because they generally can be applied further, more widespread geographically, and applied to more people?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down, frankly, I think a lot of it comes down to fundraising. And this is one thing that in hindsight, like thinking about the incentive structure that we built, like I remember back in 2004, when I could go to the communications director and say, this email got opened this many times. Whereas before, if they ran an ad on TV, you'd have to maybe do some polling to know how many people actually saw it. You're kind of estimating it, right? And they're like, oh my God, we can get exact numbers. It was like catnip to all of us. And we didn't think through the fact that then we're going to keep chasing clicks because more is better, right? Like now we kind of know that maybe more isn't better, but you slowly but surely start moving and doing more content that's getting you more clicks. Now we know about the dopamine hits, all those types of things that contribute to that. And from a fundraising perspective, because whether you're running for city council or mayor, or whether you're running for Congress or for president, you can now, because you can raise money across the entire country, you're going to try to be doing the type of content that's going to get more people to click and don't give you more money. And there's part of me that's like, it's not very Republican of me to say this, but like sometimes I'm like, maybe we should have a law that an elected, like a candidate can only raise money from the jurisdiction in which they're trying to represent. So if you're only running for Senate in Wisconsin, you should be only able to raise money from people in Wisconsin versus the entire country, because then that might, better incentivize that senator or that candidate to talk about what's happening in Wisconsin, not what's happening in the Middle East.
How is AI changing what people see in their feeds right now? How is it going to change what people see in their feeds a year from now?
I think we are going to see a total shift change in what news feeds actually look like and how people are consuming information, because we are already in information overload. And we were talking earlier, AI is going to start summarizing more of that for us. And so you may even get to a point too where you now are just going to have an AI agent that goes out to your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, your LinkedIn. Give me a digest of what's being said on these platforms. Like, am I even going to go to them anymore? Are the platforms, what are they going to do to be incentivizing people to come there, but also try to help to show them more content? Are they going to be, so there's the summarization part. And then there's also the creation of content. And Adam Nasseri, the head of Instagram, said this at the end of last year that I think, and I think he's right on this. Right now, we're still having the conversation of how do we label stuff that's fake, that's AI generated, and how do we even define that? I think that conversation is going to start to flip, and it's going to be, how are we labeling stuff that's real? How do we tell people? Because there's going to be more fake stuff and more AI generated stuff online than there is real. And then there's even that conversation of what's fake versus real. So for instance, right, I have my newsletter on Substack called Anchor Change. When I write a newsletter, I will give it a huge brain dump. Like, I'll do a long voice note. I'll have notes that sometimes it's like up to 15 pages worth of stuff. And then I ask it to help me to organize it, to maybe help do a first draft. I'll be editing, etc. I use AI like heavily in that, and I'm very transparent about that and that I do that. Is that considered fake? Or is it, if I generate an AI image of a computer in front of the US Capitol because I want to talk about tech and what's happening up on the Hill, it's a fake image. How do I disclose that, et cetera? So it kind of just goes back to, I think, we need to be having a lot more nuanced conversations about what's real versus fake. But I think that that's going to be where the conversation goes to, of what we're seeing in our feeds.
Speaking of what AI is doing on the back end right now, are we moving from algorithms that recommend to systems that create what we see?
I think it's going to be both. It's going to be both. It's going to be, you're going to have, and this is a really interesting ethical question, right? Like, if I, from an entertainment standpoint, have somebody that's creating an AI created TV show that hits all of the things that I love in a very niche way, is that harmful? Where does that, is that good? Is that bad? What do we want that to look like? What does that mean for us as a society if we have everything is super customized to us versus not of like what we have for a shared experience? And I do get concerned. I'm both like excited by that and also concerned by that, of what that looks like. And so I'm losing my train of thought a little bit here, but I think that, so like, you're going to have stuff being created for you, but it still has to be distributed in some way. That's going to be shifting from not just in your news feeds, but like what I was saying, what role does agents play in this? And how are agents delivering it? Are they delivering it via email? Is it via Slack message, right? Is it via an app on your phone? These are all things that are going to be, that are being built right now. That I think that this goes back to also talking about the conversations I'm having in Silicon Valley versus what I'm having here in DC. Here in DC, like, I talk about an AI agent and everyone's eyes gloss over and they don't really know what I'm talking about, let alone to then be able to have a conversation about the ethical guardrails on it.
Do you think there's going to be a point where we just accept anything likely has some touch of AI, generative AI with it, and we're not going to be necessarily concerned about labeling anymore?
Yeah, I do. I think it's similar to, again, going back to what we were talking about with like when Photoshop came on the scene and stuff like that, or like spell check, right? Like, we don't disclose every time. It's just kind of assumed that spell check, somebody used those types of tools. And so I think we will get to a point there that people will assume that AI was used in some way, shape, or form. But in this in-between time is why you need to be uber transparent about it, because people are still learning what that is and what it means for it to be AI generated.
And therefore adding some trust component right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So over time, and this is what I hope that, like, I don't on every single one of my posts do a disclaimer that it was AI generated, because I'm like, I've got the disclosure on my main like navigation bar that people can go and see, because I'm like, people, again, they just start to glance over it and they don't even read it because they're just like, oh, it's AI generated again. And so they just start to get used to the fact that that's what I'm using, and they know that if they want to understand it more, they can go to that page.
I'm going to close with this question. News you can use. If somebody wants a healthier feed starting yesterday, what should they do first?
So I really recommend folks do a news audit. I try to do this personally at least once a year. So you can go, it's going to be scary, but go, if you've got an iPhone, and I think Android does this too, you can go and look at your screen time. Go look at the apps that you're spending most of your time on. Then when you're, let's say, so for me, it's Instagram. You go to Instagram, like, be like, okay, what is in my feed? Is this what I actually want to be consuming? Do I want to be getting more news? Or maybe you want to be getting more gardening, right? Maybe you don't want to be getting certain things. And then if that's not what's in your feed, there's different settings for all these apps to be able to see what type of topics there are. Or be like, okay, go search for the New York Times or CNN or whatever the news outlets might be that you want to be following, and start to give the algorithm those signals of what it is that you're wanting to see, and really think about, okay, are these the news outlets, the influencers, everything that I want to be seeing, and make sure you're giving the signals to the algorithm to show you more of that.
So going to, say, the New York Times Instagram page or the DC News Now page for whom I work with, and like those posts, engage with those posts, and follow and share. Those are some things that you should do.
Exactly. Or like turn on notifications for those types of ones, et cetera. But it's all about sort of being like consciously kind of doing a little audit of like, what am I consuming on a daily basis? And does it match the values of what I actually want to be consuming?
Katie, I really appreciate your insight. I'm looking forward, if you will have maybe another conversation at some point. And I know that the folks listening on Byline will be grateful and leave a little smarter than we went into this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Of course. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Katie. I came out of it smarter than I did going into it. I would love to have her on another conversation, especially as we see how AI is deployed into our lives. If we just naturally will accept AI-generated content, generative AI, anywhere that we look, especially if trust for those platforms is achieved. Katie was talking about that. Right now, she says it's certainly a learning phase that we're all going through. Most of us are going through, of how these platforms work, what they can do for us, how they might be affecting our daily lives down the road. With that, feel free to send me your questions again on social media or bylinewithbendennis@gmail.com. You know where to reach me. Call me, beat me if you want to reach me. With that, have a great week, everybody. Take it easy.